On today's episode of Locked On Wild, are the Detroit Red Wings gearing up to make a move for a goalie? Not if Ville Husso has anything to say about it.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we will take a look at why it may be that the Detroit Red Wings are clearing room to make a run at Filip Gustavsson. We'll take a look at how recent cap moves line up pretty well with his contract. But we'll also take a look at another name in the goalie movement department that could throw a wrench into the Minnesota Wild's plans. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider. We're starting to get some trade steam as we get closer and closer to the NHL draft. And just found this fascinating yesterday. There was that move between the Detroit Red Wings and the San Jose Sharks, in which the Detroit Red Wings basically gave away a promising defenseman, Jake Walman, 28-year-old defenseman who was making $3.4 million. Gave him away to San Jose with a second-round pick for future considerations. A 28-year-old defenseman who had 21 points for Detroit this past season in 63 games. Folks, this was a salary dump. Not often do you attach a high draft pick to a player and send them to a destination for nothing in return, unless you are trying to free up cap space. And the thing that was intriguing to me about this is the fact that Walman's cap hit, as mentioned, $3.4 million. Whose cap hit is close to that? Filip Gustavsson is at 3.75. And we have talked about Detroit as a potential suitor for Filip Gustavsson if Bill Guerin is indeed trying to still trade him. Although a tweet that I will discuss later in the show today may hint that may not be as much in the cards as it was earlier this week. And so you just connect the dots. So they free up, and it's not like Detroit was hurting for cap space as it was. They have somewhere now around $32 million in salary cap space. And so it's obvious that the Red Wings are positioning themselves to make a couple of big deals. But you look at their goalie room, and we've talked about this at length over the last couple of weeks. Ville Husso, Alex Lyon, and James Reimer is an unrestricted free agent. It's not an inspiring goalie room. I don't think that's a goalie room that can get you to the postseason if you're the Detroit Red Wings. Husso has been not great since he went to Detroit from the St. Louis Blues. Just has not been all that good. And so into the fold comes the news today that the Anaheim Ducks are looking at moving John Gibson. Gibson has 3 years left on his current contract at $6.4 million remaining for each of the next 3 seasons. We know the story of John Gibson. He's been in Anaheim forever, and it just seems like more and more recently, the Ducks just have been a mess. And it has led to his production starting to trend in the wrong direction. But you also have to keep in mind the team in front of him is horrendously bad. And so David Pagnotta from the fourth period, tweeting out today, word is Anaheim is actively trying to trade goalie John Gibson. He has a 10-team no-trade list. Sounds like Detroit and another club have been engaged in talks with the Ducks. Is John Gibson at this point a better goalie than Filip Gustavsson? This is the same thing that we talked about with Jacob Markstrom. Gibson may have a little bit more in the pedigree department. He's 30 years old, so it's not as though he is entering the twilight of his career. Still has likely a couple of good years left. But the thing that I wonder about is just how much of his goalie energy have the Ducks sapped over the last couple of years. He had a 3.54 goals against average and an .888 save percentage this past season. 399 the year before that with an .899 save percentage. You have to go back to 2020, 2021, in which he had a goals against average below 3, and that was in 35 games. Like I would say, best season for Gibson all the way back to 2017, 2018, when he started 60 games and at a .926 save percentage, a .243 goals against average. Ironically, that was the last time the Anaheim Ducks made the playoffs. And so if you're looking for a veteran, if you're Detroit, checks that box. If you're looking for a guy who could potentially bounce back from just a disastrous last couple of years with Anaheim, checks that box. But here's the reason that I think the Anaheim Ducks could be appealing to Detroit and why John Gibson may be taking the lead for them in their goalie search, is because the Anaheim Ducks are uniquely qualified based off of how bad they have been, uniquely qualified to take Ville Husso's contract back. And that is not something the Minnesota Wilds can offer them. And so if Detroit is looking to add a goalie and also subtract Ville Husso from the equation, because it's Anaheim, who cares? They have, I do believe, they've got Lukas Dostal. And so you could throw Ville Husso in there as your keep him in the net until Dostal is ready to take over full time. And if you think Dostal is going to be your guy of the future, it would make a lot of sense to get Gibson out of there and to just allow for Dostal to be able to get the starts that he needs to get comfortable to potentially take over. And so as much as it seems like Detroit is a logical fit for Filip Gustavsson, Ville Husso might be the block that prevents the Wild from going that route, because you've already got Marc-Andre Fleury. You've already got Jesper Wallstedt in the mix. If you threw Ville Husso into that, it makes absolutely zero sense for the Minnesota Wild. And I don't think it's a guy that you want to add into the mix at all. Anaheim, on the other hand, they don't care if they lose games. So why not? Why not? If we clear the path for Lukas Dostal to be the starter, we'll take on Ville Husso's contract. And so that was part of the reason that, was going to do this show right off the bat. But as happens with trade rumors all the time, you kind of just want to see how things play out. And so that John Gibson wrinkle is definitely a development from what happened yesterday, because you clear $3.4 million off your books for a team that is in desperate need of a goalie. You start to connect the dots yourself, but it would not make sense for the Minnesota Wild unless Detroit could find another team to take on Ville Husso and to take on that contract, which you're limited in your options there. Anaheim, San Jose, maybe. That's a contract that you just have to pretty much stash in a team that really doesn't care if they win or lose. And so, unfortunately for the Wild, that being able to just do and there would obviously be pieces one way or the other to make it work, but then all of a sudden Detroit is acquiring a goalie that they can put on the payroll for the next 3 seasons for like just under $2 million in additional money. And so all of a sudden then that falls under the Wildman trade as well. So it's something that we'll keep an eye on here as the rest of the week unfolds before the draft. But that's a hurdle I didn't anticipate, but it's one that makes a ton of sense for Detroit, is get Ville Husso off the roster in the same trade that you bring a goalie in. So we'll see what happens. That's not the only trade rumor that is circulating here as we get closer to the NHL draft. The Winnipeg Jets, on the other end of the spectrum, though, they are looking at the possibility of moving on from a player that they drafted recently. How recently, you may ask? Last season. So we'll talk about the possibility of Rutger McGroarty being available on draft night as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. A lot of what the Florida Panthers showed in winning the Stanley Cup. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, all that and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. I'll remind everybody on the community tab on YouTube, you can ask your questions for former Minnesota North Stars forward Jack Carlson, who will be joining the live show on Sunday at noon. If you have a question you'd like to have answered by Jack, just throw it in. We'll take questions until Thursday night, just so we can give Jack a couple of days to go over them before the live show. Really excited. Should be a lot of fun. It'll be myself, it'll be Denny, and it'll be Jack Carlson joining us. So get those questions in. Otherwise, tune in for what should be an awesome show on Sunday at noon. So we go from the Detroit Red Wings trying to clear up a little cap space and potentially make a goalie move to the Winnipeg Jets, who evidently have started to sour a little bit on the Rutger McGroarty timetable, to the point that they are looking now to potentially deal him even as far down the road as on draft night itself. Now, what do we know about Rutger McGroarty? Well, I can tell you right off the bat, he plays for the University of Michigan. He was born in 2004. He is a 6-foot forward prospect. I think right wing is his primary position. And he's 6'1", 205. couple of things from Elite Prospects and EP Rinkside. Where most players outrace, he delays with a cutback or simply making a glide and angling away from back pressure. Those delays helps his playmaking, where he's deceptive, precise, and identifying the best play. Uses give and goes instead of deking, and consistently occupies the space that maximizes his odds of getting the puck back. He's a bull too. Relentlessly attacks the inside, combining skill and physicality. McGroarty shines in the offensive zone, displaying elite goal scoring and playmaking ability. He's also a slick puck handler. This past season with the University of Michigan, he had 16 goals, 36 assists, and 52 total points in 36 games. The year before that, he had 18 goals, 21 assists, 39 points in 39 games. For the World Junior Championship U20 team, he was the captain, and 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 total points in 7 games. Now, the reason that the Winnipeg Jets are evidently looking at the possibility of moving him is because of his decision, and actually it was 2022 that he was drafted 14th overall. So 2 seasons ago, not this past season. But evidently the reason that the Winnipeg Jets are looking at moving on from Rutger McGroarty has to do with his decision to go back to Michigan for his junior season. In a article by Elliot Friedman, the Winnipeg Jets 2022 first-round pick, Rutger McGroarty, is likely to be traded. Actually, it was Murat Ates of The Athletic. And Ates is under the impression that a trade is coming and soon, likely before the draft. Winnipeg may be able to use McGroarty to acquire a first-round pick, and a high one at that, or an older, more developed prospect who the front office views as ready to make an immediate NHL impact. McGroarty is also so substantial of a trade asset that he might be used to bring back a top 4 defenseman or packaged to find an upgrade at second-line center. McGroarty's decision to leave Winnipeg stems from several factors. The main reason, however, is lack of playing time at the NHL level promised by the Jets. Despite wanting him to sign after the 2023-2024 NCAA season, the Jets didn't ink McGroarty to a deal. They were unable to guarantee McGroarty NHL playing time, and he returned to Michigan for his junior year. McGroarty is still unsigned, and the Jets would be trading his rights. So the Jets didn't view McGroarty as ready to make that kind of an impact, nor were they ready to guarantee him a roster spot in the NHL through the 2023-2024 season. Ates again reporting. Okay, so in reading about this, and I kind of wanted to leave this open-ended, just to I like to make my mind up sometimes as things are talked out. This seems like a Jack McBain type situation once again. Is McGroarty reading the writing on the wall? Because that Jets team is pretty deep. And so the fact that he didn't see an avenue to the NHL level probably was a bit of a concern. As for where the Wild would come in with this, it's pretty much the same story, because there are so many players on this roster that are taking up spots to where if you could thin that out a little bit, I would be all in favor of this, because guys got clear offensive skill, and I think would be a great piece to add to the mix. And, this might not be a bad fallback option either. If the Wild were to get to 13th in the draft and just not feel like any of the players that they had on their board were available, this might be an opportunity for a fallback option. But this would be something that, depending on how all of these extensions had played out, this would be something that would make some sense for the Wild to add this guy into the mix. But I think as it stands right now, I doubt that the Wild's get involved. Now, the part of the equation that was intriguing is the fact that the Jets were looking for an upgrade on their second line. Marco Rossi's name has been linked has been discussed in trade speculation basically since the season ended and going back into the season. Again, some dots kind of come together. I don't know that I would necessarily do Rossi for McGroarty straight up, but the brain kind of wanders. So this will be something to keep an eye on as well. There have been rumors also that the Jets may look to package Nikolai Ehlers with Rutger McGroarty's rights to try to make a little bit of a bigger splash. Ehlers is an unrestricted free agent after this 2024-2025 season is over, and is making $6 million this season. So if they want to include Nikolai Ehlers, that takes the Wild out of the running as well. You've got too many positions to fill with either players or prospects. And then you are right back to not leaving yourself any breathing room. And so if the Jets want to get Nikolai Ehlers involved in this, the Wild are definitely out. But it would be intriguing to at least consider for the Wilds before draft day. But ultimately, I don't think they go either route. I don't think McGroarty is coming here. Now, final thing that I wanted to talk about here today is another opportunity for the Minnesota Wild to maybe get creative, because the Utah Hockey Club, they have a desperate need for defense. And so we'll talk about that to finish the show as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, Major League Baseball season is in its summer swing, and there is nothing better than sitting at the ballpark, whether it be at Target Field or had a chance to go see the Cleveland Guardians play, cross one of the Major League Baseball stadiums off my bucket list. And it was great to be able to not have to worry about missing out on tickets or having to have obstructed seating while I was just trying to sit and enjoy. Game Time can help take all of those worries out of the equation. Listen to these great perks that Game Time offers you. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They also offer zone deals. You can choose a section and let Game Time choose your seats. All-in pricing, you can toggle this feature, which shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And most importantly, the lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. All of these by themselves would be great reasons to check out Game Time, but Game Time offers all of them. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Wanted to finish the show today by talking about the Utah Hockey Club, because there were other reports from the circulating on X. I was going to say who they were from, but I can't find the tweet, of course. There were reports that the Utah Hockey Club is looking to acquire an impact defenseman. trying to get somebody that they can plug into their top four, because as of right now, they don't currently have a single player under contract. Now they have 3 defensemen who have a restricted free agent status: Sean Dursey, JJ Moser, and Juuso Välimäki. But Joshua Brown and Travis Dermott are unrestricted free agents. They do have the contract of Shea Weber, currently sitting on long-term injured reserve. I got a chuckle out of the fact that Shea Weber is going into the Hockey Hall of Fame, considering that his contract is still being used as a massive bargaining chip. There's still 2 more years left on that deal. But it's interesting because you look at this Jake Middleton extension possibility. It sounds as though we talked about it last week. It sounds like it's pretty much a done deal. Just ironing out some of the final details, and it'll be likely around a 4x4. This would be an opportunity if the defensive prospects for the Minnesota Wild were a little further along. This would be another opportunity to free up a spot for one of them to take. Because as of right now, you've got Jake Middleton in your top 4, but you've got Zach Bogosian, who offers the same size and physicality that Middleton has been lauded for in that pairing with Spurgeon. We saw what happened with Jared Spurgeon out of the lineup, and Jake Middleton, yes, he was injured. His numbers certainly took a hit with Spurgeon not on a pairing with him. And so I don't know. I saw that report, and that was the first thing that popped into my head was, if the Wild's defensive prospects were a little further ahead, that would probably be a situation that they look at, because I don't know what Middleton would command in return, but 28, $2.45 million signed for this upcoming season. At this point, the Utah Hockey Club will just take bodies. They just need bodies to complete the season. So maybe we need to be focusing our efforts more when Utah can't acquire said top 4 defensemen. Maybe we turn our sights back to John Merrill and say, hey, we got a guy for you. And the reason that I bring this up too is because Utah has some very intriguing young talent on their roster. So maybe you don't get a high draft pick for a guy like Jake Middleton, but you could certainly get a prospect. And they have just a ton of names that they have added to their prospect pool over the last couple of seasons. They're not all going to find spots in the lineup. You know, I just throw Josh Doan's name out there as a potential player. I mean, Connor Geekie, Dylan Guenther. Not that the Wild would get any of these guys for Jake Middleton in return, but this is kind of the part of the process where you can meet a team as you pass them, so to speak. Like, you can meet a team in need of some veteran players, and you can get a little prospect help in return. Somebody that you can add to the equation that could pop, might not, but could pop. And then that's one less hole that you have to try to fill as you continue down this path over the next couple of seasons to try to ensure that Kirill Kaprizov will stay. If it were me, I would try to give myself as many darts as I can to try to ensure that there are as few holes that need to be plugged as can be. So what is probably 99.99999% likely to happen is Utah will find somebody else, and the Minnesota Wild will lock Jake Middleton in. And look, it's not like Middleton is a terrible player that, needs to be moved off the roster. But we're in the same area of debate that has become, I think, the big divide for the fan base. Veterans, youth. You can coexist, but if you go too far one way, then you start to sag in the other. And so this, for me, if I was a GM, this for me would be the most exciting part of the season, because teams are looking like crazy to make moves around the draft and around free agency to try to set themselves up. And you can either take advantage of that, or you can be one of those teams trying to kind of position yourselves for what comes next. So it's going to be fascinating to see what plays out over these next couple of days as we dive headfirst further and further into the week and closer to the NHL draft. I can't wait. We'll have you covered all throughout the rest of the week, and we'll have you covered on draft night as well. So make sure to stay tuned. We'll have you covered if there's any breaking news, any big trades. But as was reported by Anthony DeMarco of the Fourth Period earlier today, not much traction in trade talks surrounding Marco Rossi and Filip Gustavsson at the moment. Seems like the Wild are in no rush to trade either player, though they are definitely willing to listen. So this is going to take us all the way to the 11th hour, 59th minute. We're going to go all the way down to the wire with these. So keep an eye out, because if anything does break, we've got you covered. But beyond that, enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll have more draft profiles coming up for you here before the end of the week is done. And we'll keep you covered, as we always do here at Locked On Wild. We've got new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.